Hello, students, and welcome to week 2. For week 2, we're going to be looking at assessment in sexuality counseling. And so last week we kind of did a brief introduction of the ways that that sexuality kind of touches on our profession and the work that we do with clients. And this week we're going to look at how do we assess those clients and see what's really going on. And so hopefully this can kind of help you get started with being able to get into the conversation of sexuality with clients and feel a little bit more comfortable with that. So the chapter starts off with a really great quote. Sex is a natural function. You can't make it happen, but you can teach others how to let it happen, which I think is really important. And I'm going to actually come back to this quote in a minute as we go through some of the material for this week. So the chapter then goes into some case illustrations, which I think are really important. It goes into the case of Jason and Amanda, the case of Carson, and the case of Lena. And so once you're done reading this chapter and then taking a look at the chapters in the Bueller textbook, come back to these case illustrations and really think about how you might sort of tackle these. What are some other questions you might ask? How might you engage with these clients? And what direction might you head with assessment? And so I think it's really good to have those cases there that you can reflect back on. So what the chapter essentially does is it goes over some sample interview questions you can use in different situations and circumstances with clients. And so it starts off with very general assessment and questions that would be good to really ask any client regardless of what they're coming into counseling with. And then it gets into more and more detail as we go through the chapter. And so one of the assignments you're going to be doing this semester, I believe it's due in week 5, is the sexuality interview. And so this chapter talks a little bit about that and gives some sample questions that you might ask. Of course, there are sample questions included in your syllabus and the assignment prompt, but you can also use what's in this textbook as well on pages 37 and 38. Another thing that I really like about this textbook is the exercises that are included in it. And so on page 38, there is an exercise 2.2, which talks about sexuality related language. In a lot of ways, we kind of have our own language that we use around sex and sexuality, and it may not always fit specifically with the clients, or their verbalization and their language might not fit with ours. And so it's really important to get used to different kinds of wording and how different people talk about sexuality. And so one of the first assignments that I did when I took this course is the professor actually asked us to get into groups, and one group wrote down all of the terms they could think of, had ever heard of for male genitalia. Another group did female genitalia. Another did like sexual acts and so on. And then once we had these really full list, the class was just gonna yell each of those words out as loud as we could together as we went down the list. And so it kind of took some power away from some of those words that maybe we struggle to say or struggle to hear. And so that's definitely something that you can engage in by yourself or with some others, so that you can get used to different words and using them. And of course, we want to make sure that we know the proper language for different things, but also being aware that our clients might not always know them, and they might use different types of slang and stuff like that. So again, the book kind of, or the text, or the chapter goes on to talk about the different areas that really impact sexuality. And we don't always think about sexuality as being as dynamic as it is. And so obviously there's a physiology related to it. And so we can ask clients questions about that, but it's really important for us to know when we need to refer to a medical professional. Not necessarily saying that in all of those cases there may be medical issues or physiological issues, but it's really important in many cases related to sexuality that clients do get checked out, whether it's for kind of a dysfunction that's happening or an STD or anything like that. We should have a connection with medical providers just in case that's the issue. Another is developmental issues. And so what ways might the development of the individual have a big impact? And so that is something that we should be able to explore and be willing to explore with our clients. Next is mental health issues that impacted, or mental health issues that are a result to it, or as a result of it. Gender identity and sexual affectional orientation. And I think most of us are used to the term sexual orientation. There's a movement within the counseling field, specifically through the ACA, to move this term towards affectional orientation, which really encapsulates it a lot better, right? Because it's not just about sexual behaviors and who we want to engage in sexual behaviors with, but it's also about who we want to engage in relationships with and have affection with. And so sometimes when people think about sexual orientation and somebody who may identify as gay or lesbian or bisexual, their head automatically goes to sex and what sex acts are they engaged in. And really that's no one's business. And so when we move to the term affectional orientation, it truly is about having relationships with others and how to connect with others. And so someone's sexual orientation may actually be a little different than their affectional orientation, right? They may be desiring sex with different genders, but as far as affection and relationships, they only want to engage in those with one specific gender. And so there's a lot of different moving parts, and that's why the change in terminology, which this chapter does get into a little bit more and talks about how those impact assessment. The next one is relationship dynamics, which I touched on a little bit. Obviously, when it comes to sexual issues, if they're relating to other people and engagement with other people, we may want to talk about the relational component of that, because sometimes there may be issues in the relationship that are causing the sexual issues, or the sexual issues are a result of the relational issues, and back and forth. So that should be taken into account, as well as cultural and contextual issues, which I know that you all take the cross-cultural course, but this also kind of reminds us of how important those different factors really relate to our work as counselors. And then actually the last topic that we talk about this semester is positive sexuality. And so this talks about ways in which people look at sexuality and how that impacts their ability to function in this realm. And so that is it for the chapter in your Murray book, I call it the MPW for short. And then the appendix of the chapter goes over a number of different assessments, some of which are free, some of which you'd have to pay for, but that you can assess different types of sexual issues with. So depending on what the client is coming in with, could be relational issues and so on. It has a nice chart on several pages that go over all of this. So you have that information in your toolbox. So the next reading that we have for this week is in the second textbook, which is the What Every Mental Health Professional Needs to Know About Sex. And I know that some of you had questioned whether or not you have to purchase this book. We are going to be doing readings in this book all semester. We are also going to possibly have some quiz questions related to this text. I will be posting all of the PowerPoints for all of the chapters in this text, as well as study guides for those chapters if they're going to be used on the quiz. And so you may be able to get the information you need from those. But this is a really, really great toolbox for you to use in clinical practice. And so what it does is it really puts in nice ways that you can directly talk to clients about these issues. And so one example is a chapter on talking to parents about sex. And so if you're working with kids, how do you engage in those conversations with the parents? Well, it helps you right here. Another one is about how to engage in safe anal intercourse. And that could be a topic that's really important when you're working with your clients. And so you could actually just photocopy this page and give it to them. The other thing that's really great about this book is at the end of every chapter, it gives you resources and information that you can look further into the topic, which is invaluable in our clinical practice. And so if you don't buy this book at this time, it's really important for you to buy it at some point, because it will be useful during the course of your career, I promise. So the chapter that we're going to be looking at this week in the Bueller book is also chapter 5, makes it a little bit easier. And so the PowerPoint is posted in the module section and in the file section of the course. And so the title is Assessing Sexual Problems as well. And so what this chapter starts with is the PLICIT model, which is also discussed in your MPW book. And PLICIT is a very base what we should be capable of doing with our clients. And so first is giving permission. And so being able to be open to their questions, their comments, their thoughts, explorations, and things like that. So just giving them permission to have these thoughts, to have these feelings, to be going through this. And sometimes that in and of itself is enough to help us make it through, right? The second is limited information. And so not all of us are going to be sex therapists or sexologists, right? And so that may not be the primary thing that you're working with in this field. However, we need to be able to give some level of limited information to our clients so that if the issue is something that's a little bit bigger, right, we assess it as being something a little bit out of our wheelhouse, out of our scope of knowledge, then we can then refer to someone else. But sometimes, again, just giving them permission and then the limited information is enough to help them to move forward. The next step is specific suggestions. And in some cases, the general practitioner can do this, right? Can kind of give some suggestions to help out with relationships or, talking about these things, stuff like that. But in some cases at that point, it may be where you need to refer to a specialist, a sex therapist, someone who works very specifically in this field. And then the next step, which is intensive therapy, is definitely when you want to refer to someone who is a sex therapist. If you are not qualified to work with it, you don't have that scope of knowledge, then you need to know that you can and should refer in those cases. And so the PLICIT acronym is something that you should really take away from this course, kind of have burned into your brain of these are the steps that I can do within my scope of expertise, and this is where I need to draw the line and refer a client out. So this text then kind of talks a little bit more about the sexological microsystem and the ways that those different parts impact sexuality. So again, biology, physiological state, family of origin, peers, the sexological mesosystem and exosystem, which includes school, religion, media, healthcare system, and then finally the macrosystem, which includes culture and gender. And these are all the same things that we kind of talked about in the MPW book, using a little bit of a different wording. But another part that I really like about this text is that she has sections in here called Step Into My Office, where again, they go through cases very briefly that highlight those things that she's discussing in the course of the text. And so that's something that's really awesome for you to take a look at while you're looking through this text. So next is the sexological chronosystem and ecosystem assessment, and how we might sit down with clients and kind of go through those micro and meso and chronosystems and help them to sort of sort this out. What ways does your gender play in with your sexuality? In what ways does your culture, your peers, your family of origin, biology, all of that stuff, and really work on assessing this with the clients. Another thing that it brings up is the sexual genogram. And so some of you may be familiar with the genogram from your introduction to family courses, right? We can do a family genogram to help understand patterns within the family when it comes to communication, relationships, abuse, addiction, all of those things. Well, we can do it with sexuality as well. And so she describes a little bit about how we can use the sexual genogram, right, to help our clients or to help them to explore or to do assessments and things like that. Finally, she does talk a little bit about some very specific sexual assessments that you can get your hands on to use with clients. And then, as with every chapter in this textbook, there are takeaway points at the end. So really important things that you want to walk away from this topic with, and then some activities that you can do on your own, which can be really helpful in you really gaining an intimate knowledge of these things that you could be doing with your clients. And so some of the activities that she discusses for this week in this chapter is assessing your own sexual ecosystem, right? So go through that process that she describes for yourself, because not only one, can you learn a lot about yourself and your biases, and then kind of work on how they might impact your work with clients and challenge them, but you also understand the process that a client would be going through. And so you're learning how to do it with them by practicing it on yourself, which is really good. Another one is writing down some ways to introduce the topic of client sexual health in the context of the setting which you practice, which some of you I know may not be practicing right now. If possible, take turns with a trusted colleague to work on the ecosystem assignment, right? And so you guys can kind of work with each other, kind of looking at it as an assessment and how you might talk with clients about it. And then the final one that she has here is how might you modify the assessment to fit into your setting and your theoretical approach? Because again, with everybody who has different theoretical approaches, we all might address these different things in different ways with our clients, right? They may look very different. And so at the end, she has some resources that you can look into, and obviously references that she uses during the course of the text. And then the appendix to that chapter goes over the sexological ecosystemic questionnaire that you can kind of practice with yourself and potentially with someone that you trust, a peer or colleague. And so you can kind of see right there what that looks like. And she goes through a couple pages of questions that you can use to work on this with yourself. And so that is it for the readings for this week. We don't have any additional materials. This week's assignments, you have continuing the sex box assignment, so add your materials to that so we can have a lot of great discussion throughout the semester when we meet in those Zoom meetings. We also have the pre-class reflection due this week, which is worth 50 points. It's just really talking about and reflecting on where you are now as far as your comfort level, your knowledge, and your preparation to do this work with clients. And so this is going to be in contrast to what we do at the end of the semester with your post-class reflection. And so there are some questions to reflect on and answer included in the assignment prompt. So make sure you take a look at that as you're doing the assignment. Finally, this week we have our first discussion post. And so I want to take a look at this with you guys. The first one says to reflect on a moment or for a moment on your own views of sex and sexuality and what is considered normal for you. So what is your comfort zone? What messages you've received? What do you picture when you think of your personal views of sex? So it's kind of related to that pre-reflection, pre-course reflection you're going to be doing. But in this case, you're just going to be thinking about that and then finding maybe an image or a couple images, a video, a song, or something that's really symbolic or illustrative of your own concept or expression of sex and sexuality. It can be something that's in popular culture, or you can take your own photo or video using the posting options that I kind of have in your discussion post for the semester. Use the text box to embed those images or videos or to link external content that you might be connecting to. And then also answer the questions briefly. Tell us what this represents to you. So like, why did you pick it and what it means? How does it capture some of your own beliefs, values, identities about sex and sexuality? So you'd want to kind of explain that a little bit. And what about it feels comfortable or normal for you? And this could also include ways you want to challenge it, right? And so the discussion post is due on Thursday this week, and then you're going to follow up by responding to at least one peer, hopefully more, but at least one peer by Sunday night, so you can engage in conversation with others in the course. And throughout the semester, when you respond to your peers, you want to use the ABC method of responding. You want to acknowledge the contributions that they made, acknowledge whether you agree, disagree, or both. Build on the ideas by adding your own thoughts or analysis to what they added or what they posted. And then C, you want to contribute to the discussion by adding something to it. Add a question for your peer or peers to think about. Maybe add something that deepens the understanding of the material. So additional resources or things that you've learned or connected in some way, maybe an example within your own life or work with clients. And then finally provide, or you could provide a supplemental resource. So, hey, this is something that I learned about and would be really helpful for this, this post that this thought process that you kind of put out here in this post, things like that. And so that's the way we're going to kind of frame discussions for the semester. But I really like this one a lot. For anybody who I've told this to before or has seen some of my my research interest, my dissertation was actually on sexual culture, and the individuals that were involved in my study were to take images, so to take pictures of things that kind of spoke to them about the sexual culture on campus. And so with this assignment being to find an image, a video, a song, something like that, that really symbolizes it for you, just really taps into my interest. And so I'm so excited to see what you all post and how the conversation goes. And so that is pretty much it for this week's content. I look forward to reading your pre-class reflections as well. And you will continue to see these videos on weeks that we don't have a Zoom meeting. And then on Zoom meeting weeks, we're going to have a chance to talk face-to-face in real time. And then I'll be posting up those videos for you. And you also get that written weekly intro like I did for week 1, where it just kind of covers like, hey, this is what we need to focus on this week. And so hopefully it'll give you as much as you need to stay engaged in the course and stay on track. Any questions or anything like that, feel free to contact me. You can always email me, you can text me, or we could always do a phone or Zoom meeting if you need to. So best wishes this week, and enjoy the content. Thanks.